kiki o nā manu. Holo no ai wai o lama me ka wailapo. Iho o kai me wailo. Pa i ke kula o hana kai. A kai kamana o a ke aloha I noho aloha I moku ola. I ola e nā kini e. I ola e nā kini e.
Kaulana mai nei o hilo ea, ka ua kani le hua ea.
Ka ua o mulu ini ea, ka ili o ka mali ini ea.
Kaulana mai nei o hilo ea, ka ua kani le hua ea.
Ka ua o mulu ini ea, ka ili o ka mali ini ea.
Nani male ho I ka ikena ea, ka nani o waia ke a ea. Ka vai o lama ea, ma lama lama a vai I ea.
Nani wale ho I ka ikena ea.
Ka nani o waia ke a ea.
Ka wai o wai o lama ea. Malama lama
Vai I ea.
Ai ai I ona.
No I moku ola ea, he moku au I ke kai ea.
E hoku hine I ea,
Ka hune hine kai ea. Ko lana hoi moku ola ea, he moku au I ke kai ea.
e hoko pulu ili nei ea, ka hune hune kai ea.
Leana I ka leikani ea, ka pua o ka lehua ea.
Haina mai ka puana ea,
No ka ua kani lehua ea. Leana I ka leikani ea, ka pua o ka lehua ea.
haina mai ka puana ea, no ka ua kani le hua ea. No ka ua kani le hua ea. No ka ua kani le hua ea.
Oi, ano ay Miki, aloha kako. Aloha kako. Good to see everyone this morning. My name is Ku'ulei, and I'm thankful to know very many of you in this space. I see Dagny and Autumn and Ku'uwahi Anake, my Auntie Tiff. I see Ellie and TC. I see that Yuko is here and Ellen is here. Auntie Marsha, aloha again. Kiera, aloha. I'm glad to see that you could make it to hang out with us this morning. Vanessa Lee and Andy, aloha kako. Aloha. We can go to the next slide. Right. I can share my screen here. Before we go into today's system design conversation, I think most of you are familiar with who I am. I think if not, my name is Ku'ule and I come from Panaeva, and just thankful to be in this space, working with each of you to get less opala into the pu'u opala that is at the foot of Pu'uanahulu. So just very thankful. So I'm going to share my screen so that I can share some of these edits that I made to the mural. And I think Andy, thank you so much for all of the work that you've done to support our adaptive use of the mural app. Is it correct that you've been helping us with that?
I did my best. I'm glad it was helpful.
It's truly, it's meaningful. It's really, really amazing to be able to work with that tool. So just mahalo, Andy. Okay. So if you can see, this mural is kind of positioned in a way where really, really big things can be made really, really small so that it can fit into a larger picture of a lot of other bigger things. So here we have all of the work that we've been doing when it comes to the reusable foodware program. But I wanted to, before we go into more of the details on that, I wanted to just ground into the larger picture. So Zero Waste Hawaii Island, we partner with Perpetual, who has much to do with the reusable foodware system and making sure that that's something that we can adapt and adopt successfully in Hilo. But Zero Waste Hawaii Island is a local organization, and we recently adopted these particular values. And the reusable foodware program is one part of a bigger picture when it comes to the intention of our organization. So our 6 values are kanaka, which is related to individual wellness and the wellness of a person. This is related to their spiritual, mental, physical, and financial health and wellness, because a lot of times zero waste requires some level of wellness and health in order to be able to wash dishes to reuse, in order to be able to really activate our own consciousness in making decisions that are good for our bodies and our bodies of water and land as well. But kanaka is that concern for the individual and their/our wellness. The next value that we have is aina, which aina is the word for land, but it has to do with environmental accountability. And this is place-based action and leadership, and affection for vahipana, which is significant place, sacred place. That is the word vahipana. So here we have a picture of Pu'uanahulu. And this is a photo that I took, and you can see these majestic pu'u, the Napu'u area. You can see Hualalai in the background, and then you can see where our trash is quite literally dumped. And so it's a visceral photo. This one is for me, because I know people who were born in this area. I think this is more, maybe Pu'uva'ava'a and Pu'uanahulu is more to the side, but it's the same area here. So yeah, it's gut-wrenching to see that this is where all of our waste goes. And so bigger picture, yeah, not just the reusable foodware system, but the impact that will have on our Aina Aloha. So just our beloved land. So just grateful to share these things. Aina has to do, so there are some resources here, and we're just grounding into each of these values before we move on. But I wanted to share this Olalono Eau, He Puko'a Kani Aina. It means a coral reef grows into an island, and it makes me to be excited to think about the Kumulipo and our cultural cosmology in knowing that the Ako'ako'a and the Ukuko'ako'a are like the coral and the coral polyp. And according to Hawaii truth, those were one of the very, very first things to be born in this universe. And from the small coral polyp grew large land masses. And so that idea helps us to understand that even if we struggle to have the financial health, to the physical health, the mental health, to do all of these things that are involved with zero waste initiatives, even if we struggle to do that right now, small decisions can make a big impact in our lives. So I'm thankful to share some of these things. I want to spend 10 hours on this whole part, but I think it's okay for us to do a couple of values at a time. So today we'll focus on Kanaka and Aina. Some of the resources to address our individual wellness include Hui Malama Ola na Oiwi. This link will take us to a calendar of their events. They have online yoga classes. They're a health center for Native Hawaiians, and they service the large Native Hawaiian community, but they're in Hilo. I think they also have spaces around Hawaii Island, but they're Hawaii County mostly. And Hui Malama Ola na Oiwi also offers I think they've done tobacco cessation type things. They've done healthy nutritional eating types of workshops, and that's their org. So we can check out that link when we have our own space and time. Active and Fit is a really awesome gym related program. The Ma'iola curriculum is a PDF, and it has to do with cultural wellness, which is super important. And it's a beautiful resource for us to look over. It's a PDF, this one. Our physical health for Kanaka is related to our ability to farm, to fish, to build house, to do things that are familiar to our muscles, and to even step outside of the gym, because the gym is not the only way culturally that we can be moving our bodies, but to get back into these ancestral patterns of activity. There's a financial literacy resource here through Khan Academy, but our financial health is related to earning a living wage and making sure that we have running water to wash our dishes, and making sure that we have access to transportation. All of those things seem distant from zero waste applications, but it's necessary for us to address these things as we develop the capacity to be able to adopt good health. So the Mapuna Lab is another resource. I used to work for the Mapuna Lab, and they have some resources here for health. This Hawaii Cares line, the Kumuhonua Mauliola, and this resolution. So these are all resources for us to tap into as we develop the capacity to make good decisions based on our individual wellness, which will impact the wellness of our place. So very good. That's the first value for today. Next, we're moving on to, and we're just blazing through these things, but I hope you do take some time on your own to visit this mural and take advantage of some of these links. So in this piece on Aina, environmental accountability, we're looking at place-based action and leadership. This Olalono Eau is Nei Kahonua He Ola Ia, and we just had an earthquake within the past week, and it was really, really I haven't experienced that type of earthquake in a week. I mean a decade or so. So it was earth-shattering, but luckily everyone in my ohana was safe. But that Olalono Eau, that proverb, is related to action. We know what something is because of what something does, not because of what it says it is, not because of what it says it does, but because of what it does. And so when we're looking at Aina and our love for place, it's important for us to know about Pu'u'anahulu specifically. So there's a report here. Uncle Kepa Mali and Auntie Onaona with their Kumupono Associates organization, they put together this report which compiles information from people who used to live in the hills of Pu'u'anahulu and the Napu'u area. This environmental impact statement was done years ago in preparation for this landfill. Nani Vale Pu'u'anahulu is an important song that we should be hearing and playing often in our love for Pu'u'anahulu. And then there are additional resources that Kumupono Associates have put together on other places. In case anybody is interested in learning more about Ahupua'a, there's a GIS map that you can plug your address in and find out what Ahupua'a you live in if you're in Hawaii. So these are important cultural concepts that help us to live and bring zero waste applications into our bodies, so that we can normalize the re-indigenization of zero waste culture. So it was a bit verbose this morning here, but I'm very thankful to share. And over the next few system design meetings, we'll go over these other resources. But I want to stop sharing my screen. And now I would like to offer an oli. This is an oli that is very special to me because I wrote it for my ohana, but also it's an oli or a chant that really uplifts our spirits to be in a place of seeking what is good and what is right for us individually and collectively. So this is Okukaha'ula. O kukaha'ula ka vekio ka mauna he mauna ki e hilani he makana o ka lani Pohai ke aloha aloha ho'i ke akua I mana e ulua e ka pono e ho'i ka malia o kulani Oh yeah. Mahalo. I will hand it back to Autumn and or Ellie to help us to get into the grit of the reusable foodware process. Mahalo, everybody.
Thank you, Kule. It's great to have you back. We missed you last week. It's definitely different with you here. So thank you for being here. And thank you to everyone else who's here as well. Our group is small but mighty. I think that, you know, what we're able to do in this group is a great foundation for then what, you know, this design can go out into the world and receive additional feedback. And, you know, sort of we're creating the scaffolding that, you know, that this process will continue to then move through in the next process. So it's okay that we have a small group. Thank you for being part of the group that's taking time to, you know, bring your thoughts and experiences into this process, and for doing the work now so that other people can build off of your work in the next two review processes as well. We will take a quick look at the timeline. Autumn, do you want to just skip to the next slide? So here's where we are. We are in week 5 of ? I think we'll see how we go today. And I think it's entirely possible that we will need another week after the regularly scheduled 6 meetings ends next week. So stay tuned for the exact timing and extension of that, but we'll see how we go today. And then next week we'll have updates on what happens next. And I think if you want to, I think we don't need to do this today. And I actually think everyone who's here now has been at least one of these meetings previously. So I don't think we need to review any other content from our deck. I think Autumn, keep me honest here, but I think we're ready to jump to the Miro board. Does that sound right?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, awesome. So if you wanna, you can stop sharing, and Andy, I will look to you for Miro navigation support when you're ready. The topics that we're gonna jump into today, we're looking at scope. So which items do we want to start with for the reusable system? We're looking at materials. So what are the most appropriate and what materials would people be most excited to have to use for the different items that are in the system? over time. And then we'll talk a little bit about return bin. And we have a super fun interactive exercise for placing your preferred bin locations on a map that we may do if we have time on this call, or it only takes a few minutes. You can also do it afterwards and share the link with friends and family so we can make sure that we get as much input on that as possible. So here we are, as you know now from what Kool-Aid just shared, we are in a tiny little corner. We're in like a little pixel of the much bigger perspective, but it's a pixel we're excited to focus on today. So Andy, if you want to take us to, I actually forgot where it is on the page. I see collection bin. Autumn, remind us where we have the actual foodware.
So if you go up and then
Is it
to
up
the
and to the
left a
left?
little bit,
Okay. Thank
the
you. There we go.
blue section. Yeah.
Scope and reusables. So one of the things that is probably important to say right off the top here is that this is a decision that requires some data that we are still in the process of gathering. So what we plan to share, what we plan to do with our time together on this topic today is listen. So share a little bit about what we do know, and then, you know, some of how we've thought about this so far. But really, this is a chance to just listen to where people's thinking is at the moment. And then this is something that we can revisit once we have some of the data that we need to make these into official recommendations or decisions for the system design. Autumn, is scope below? If we, it looks like we're, oh no, I see, here we go. So Andy, zoom in just a tiny bit more. So we're looking, yeah, just at the scope piece and not the materials. There we go. If you read the pre-read document, which is on the website, this will look familiar to you. So when we talk about kind of the scope of the program, what we're thinking about is operationally, it's simplest to launch with one type of item. So we don't want to try to launch with 15 different types of packaging or cups or jars or bottles or containers. We want to pick one thing that will be enough to be a really strong start, and that will give us enough volume to really have a good solid, you know, launching point for the system. But we don't want to add unnecessary complexity by having too many different things to wrangle right off the bat. So the proposed options, you can see here, cups, refillable jars / bottles, and then containers. And so there's pros and cons to starting with each of these. And I'll do a really, really kind of high level overview. You can see them all on the page here, so I'm not gonna read to you, but the cups, I think the short version of why you might consider starting with cups is that they are simpler in terms of logistics and washing. They have a very high level of visibility, as you sort of from a behavioral perspective, you see people walking around with cups in some places. This may or may not be true in Hilo, but I think sometimes cups are more easily sort of seen as you walk around on the go, you know, walking down downtown streets or whatever, carrying a drink in your hand, a coffee, a kombucha, whatever it is. So that can have a nice kind of reinforcing effect on behavior in terms of creating a new norm for reuse, but we can discuss if that would work in Hilo or not. And cups, because they're consumed on the go, tend to often become litter. You know, they tend to overflow from street garbage cans or just get tossed on the ground or get thrown out of a car window. We hope not, but sometimes that happens. So those are some of the reasons that cups are appealing. They are pretty simple logistically, and they can have a high impact. One of the reasons we might consider not starting with cups in this program is if cups just aren't in Hilo kind of the right symbol. You know, we've heard a bit already about like plate lunch and, you know, what are some of the habits or the way that people live in Hilo that might make cups less impactful visually or sort of culturally compared to takeout containers, for example. We also know from some of the grants that we've received that we will be supporting nonprofits and schools around serving meals, and those will most likely be using containers as opposed to cups. And so it would put us out of alignment in the public system compared to those sort of nutrition programs. So those are pros and cons for cups. I'm going to blaze through these other two, and then I'm going to open it up for discussion. So we've talked a bit on this in this forum before about bottles. We know that there's a really strong local economy around juices and iced coffee or cold brew coffee and kombucha and a lot of locally produced drinks. And we recognize that there could be a real opportunity both for businesses and for users in providing reusable packaging for those drinks that can be circulated, you know, that maybe could even have cost savings for local businesses, given how expensive some of the glass bottles are to start with, but TBD on that. The trickiness here with bottles is that bottles, so things that have a narrower neck than body, require distinct washing capabilities compared to the to containers like a cup or a food container, which are open. They don't have a constriction. They just are completely, open to be washed. And so in order to address the bottle space, it would probably need to look more like a jar, like a refillable, like a canning jar almost probably, than a bottle. So keep in mind when we now talk about bottles, it's probably not the bottle you're used to getting your coconut water from Locavore store at. It's something more like a canning jar. But this, because there's so much demand for this local packaging for local food and drink, because you could put kind of a lot of other things into jars as well. This is something that we're certainly interested in hearing about, hearing if there's an opportunity to start here. The major con I would highlight, since I think we can solve the washing trick with the different shape, is that if we're working with glass in the jars and bottles, we will likely need a different return protocol compared to throwing something in a street bin, which is what you could do for cups and containers, but that would be more challenging when it comes to glass. So if we end up with glass bottles and other materials of something else, then discrete return systems are more likely to be needed. So that's just a consideration. And then finally, containers. So this would be like you get a meal to go and you get it in probably a clamshell kind of a thing that opens up. Maybe it has compartments where you have different things in the different compartments and you take it with you. So these are hugely used in Hilo. I know because there's not a lot of dishwashing capacity, a lot of restaurants use these even for dine-in meals because it's easier than washing dishes. But, wouldn't it be great if they could be reused, washed by someone else and then reused again? Again, there's alignment with the community nutrition programs. And so that would be a great place to start there. One piece here is, is there a single container that would address a lot of the need? Or would we need a whole assortment of containers to allow folks to serve the food that they need? Do we need sushi trays and bento boxes and clamshells and soup bowls, and all those kinds of things? So that's something we're really interested in your opinion on, and we're also gathering that data. So I will stop there. And I think this is our chance to just open it up and hear from the folks on this call, where you think, taking this into account and obviously taking your own perspective and experience and, living in Hilo, where do you think is the best place to start? And you can say more than one if you like. I think it's possible to start with more than one, but I think most likely we would like to start with one and then expand over time just to keep things simple. So open for discussion. And you can just speak up, or you can raise your hand, your little Zoom hand, or whatever people are most comfortable with. And always feel free to put comments in the chat as well. I'm tempted to put someone on the spot. Okay, please go ahead.
Yeah, this is Ellen. It's another pro for refillable jars and bottles, and only because we are one of 10 states that has a redemption value, on bottles, cans, and plastic bottles, cans, and glass. So the behavior is there, even though the redemption value is not significant, I don't think. But some people do return their or turn them in, I should say, for redemption, their drinks. So
thank you, Ellen. TC, I think you've raised your hand. Oh, sorry, Marshall.
Oh, no, go ahead.
TC, make sure to unmute.
Yeah, I wanted to offer everyone else the practical perspective of participating in one of these systems for the university that I helped design the program and also was a participant of. We had mason jar, glass jars for the reusable containers. The practicality of that was the ease of obtaining the containers. We didn't have to go through a specialized vendor or anything. You could get them virtually anywhere. And being on the mainland, it wasn't something that was a supply issue that we had to wait a long time for. And the washing system that was being used by the dining services pretty much, handled that like, any other very wide open cup. So it didn't require a specialized tray or anything else to be washed. Coupling that with two food containers. One was, I can't remember the exact ounce capacity, but it was a soup container or some kind of liquid. They didn't always use it just for soup, but it was a liquid food type of container, and then a clamshell. And both of those were a long use durable plastic container at the time. And I want to say that, the logistics of that from the washing perspective worked really well. I wasn't there long enough by the time they were reusing the clamshells to reach their expected life of about 500 or 600 uses. On any single container, I don't know that our tracking ever found one that had been used that much by the time I retired, but they were holding up very well. In a college situation, the main reason we went to that type of a clamshell instead of stainless steel was just the abuse that it would take. They were very worried about stuff getting dented to the point that it would start to become not as usable, or the aesthetics of it getting, the corners, dinged in, or people just not paying attention to it, and it getting misshaped to where it wouldn't close correctly, so that things were, either leaking out easily or just not performing correctly, was one of the main considerations. And so that's why they used plastic. The glass jars did present a problem that we knew going into it, but didn't know quite the scope until it started to develop. And that was more of a public safety issue because of all the concrete and stairs around our university. The Humboldt, it was also known as let me back up. The acronym for it used to be HSU, Humboldt State University. Now it's a Cal Poly, but the substitute acronym was Hills and Stairs University, because it's all built on hillsides. You couldn't go anywhere without being on some kind of stairway to go somewhere. So there were lots of stairs everywhere, and everything's, concrete or asphalt for the hardscape. And so the grounds department and indoors, the whatever building service maintenance folks were getting a high increase in calls for broken glass in a lot of places. And it wasn't unmanageable, but it was something that was very noticeable to everybody who had to deal with those sorts of things. It didn't end up leading to any discontinuation of glass containers during the time I was there, but that was a consequence that we knew was possible. And it was borne out that, those containers were much more fragile than using something like a stainless steel container. And it had that public safety issue, that cropped up. And of course, their stock, they went through many more of those units than they were first thinking because of the breakage. So those are the main things I at least wanted to point out for practical use of that and experience with it. If anybody's got additional questions, I'm happy to try and answer.
TC, you're a wealth of information on this. Thank you for bringing your firsthand knowledge to this process. It's really interesting to hear about the glass and how that worked out, or at least to your knowledge. Marcia, I know you had had a comment.
Oh, I appreciated what Tall Chief was able to share. And I'm wondering where are we on data from our test sites that happen in Hilo? Can you say what containers or cups or refillable jar bottles, what were used? I was not able to attend one of those, unfortunately.
The workshops did give people a chance to use some examples, but it was not, I would say the cups were somewhat representative. We had two different kinds of stainless steel cups, and we had, I think, one kind of plastic cup. So it was a little bit of an example of what that could look like, though there's certainly many designs out there. And Autumn, you'll have to remind me because the workshops blur together for me a little bit. Did we track what materials people chose for cups as they were going through or not? I know we've done that sometimes, but I wasn't sure if we did that everywhere.
We did in other cities, but didn't get that
Not in
data
Hilo.
for Hilo. Yeah.
Okay. So we only have anecdotal data on sort of which cups were used more commonly than the others. My memory of how that went is that it was probably like 75 people went for the stainless steel and 25% went for the plastic, which was kind of a green, somewhat flexible cup that we were offering. We didn't have sample containers of the kind that would be used in the system for when we served food. We actually had plates. We had like ceramic plates that were used. So more like a dine-in experience than like a to-go experience for the workshops. And when we had bottles, we only had the ones from the local board store that were the coconut water bottles. And so that was the example that we had. And of course, that was like also you get a free coconut water, which was pretty nice. So what we're working on now for the next couple of weeks, we have some wonderful people who are going to go around and actually kind of canvas businesses and find out what they use the most of right now. So how many cups are they using in an average day, average week, high, low, for example, on the container side. Similarly, like what kinds of containers are people using and about how many roughly, and how much for dine-in versus how much for takeout. So we expect to have much better data on that pretty soon. It's a challenging thing to get this data. So we appreciate the effort being made to get it. And we're really excited to have it once it exists. We do have really good data on the refillable bottles programs, like how many bottles, maybe 5 or 6 of the biggest users in Hilo have. So we have some of that data, and it's a lot of bottles. So I don't know if I completely answered your question. That's what we know and what we don't know as of right now. And one thing that we're working on, though, is actually being able to provide real examples of what the cups and the bottles and the containers would look like, so that at future events, people can have a chance to pick them up, try them out, experience them a bit more and provide more specific feedback on not just which, concept you like best, but which actual item you like best.
Yeah, thank you for all that information. So we're just kind of having a general discussion about all these different containers. Is that it?
Yeah, for right now, we would love your sense of which of these 3 types of items do you think would be the best one to start with? Which is the one that will give people the best kind of starting experience and will most easily fit into people's kind of daily habits and routines?
Well, I think definitely the cups, there's some really good points made for that. And I see cups and I see containers. Well, just from my experience being at events and seeing what is going into the opala, the trash, and then there's these refillable jars and bottles. That would be a whole new thing, to see. In this system, maybe not so much, but just in general, I'm just thinking about what I'm used to seeing and what would be new and good. It's all good. I love all the different materials, the stainless steel. I mean, So I think starting with the simplest first, or maybe not necessarily the simplest, but the cups, you know, because yeah, people are buying, you know, drinking there. But like I said, the cups, and I see people using a lot of containers for food, you know, to take away, especially. So that would be my comment.
Thank you, Marcia. So you see a lot of value in both cups and containers. If you had to sort of pick one versus the other, it sounds like you would lean towards cups. Am I hearing you correctly, or would you?
Yeah, I think that would be a good one to start with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Kira, I saw you put a comment in the chat saying you like both containers and cups. If you're willing to either chat more or say more about your logic for that, you know, what is it that convinces you? And if you had to pick one or the other, which one would you want to start with?
Good morning. Yeah. Probably I would want to start with containers. I believe it's against health code in Hawaii for people to bring in their own food containers for restaurants to put in takeout or foods and stuff like that. Whereas it is okay for people to bring in reusable cups and jars for drinks and whatnot. So I feel like more rubbish is generated when it comes to takeout containers, just because people don't have that option like they do with glassware, things like that, to bring it in already on their own to help reduce the rubbish. So first I would think containers would be my thing. There's also kind of, at least in my opinion, somewhat of already a reusable culture here at Hilo with like the reusable jars at Locavore and at Love by the Sun, you get 50 cents back for returning their glass jars when you take juice away, things like that. So containers and cups too, just because all of the rubbish I see that's generated from people when they do take away drinks. But if I had to start or pick either or, containers would be my choice.
Thank you, Kira. I see some agreement in the chat from Kule, and she's also bringing Troy into it as well. So Andy, make sure you note a few more votes for the containers. Kule or Troy, does either want to speak to that, or should we just mark your votes on the board?
Yeah, I think the part of the mana'o is that a lot of folks generally do like canned drinks, like Hawaiian Sun or a soda. And in my experience, that's always accompanied by a plastic clamshell. So I feel like it would be really impactful if we could, Uncle Troy was saying previously, like we need to get those plastic things out of the landfill because they're big, you know, like they're stackable when you stack them all, but no one stacks them to throw them away. And so when you close them, I imagine there's like some space that it takes up. You know, I don't know how that translates over time, but yeah, I in my family and in my personal life, I know I see a lot of the plastic clamshells, but yeah.
And Jennifer, I noted your comment in the chat that containers or cups, depending on volume, so whichever one is there's more of being used. So that's logical. Go ahead.
My instinct that it is like the clamshell plate lunch that is probably the most utilized, but I'm open to being wrong about that. It's certainly like for me in my personal life, that's what I'm ending up with takeout. I'm not buying a lot of drinks, but you know, if we find cups are really high usage with our data, like just looking in rubbish cans in downtown Hilo, I see a lot of cups. So you know, I think we could let the data guide us as well to decide if it's cups or containers, but I think it's definitely either a clamshell or a cup, you know.
Mm-hmm. Part of what it could be interesting about this is we think that launching with one is the easiest, but the goal is to expand it, you know, as soon as it's reasonable to do so. So we're not trying to choose one and not choose another. It's just a question of sequencing. But this is all really good feedback. I see a few more comments in the chat. TC agreeing that supporting containers to start would make sense either with cups simultaneously or following on. Vanessa, thank you for adding your comment that you agree with Jennifer on choosing higher usage volume when we have some of that data. And Ellen, I see your comment as well around aligning with containers because it aligns with the schools and other eateries and some of the other programs that we'll be with. And now Yuko weighing in. Thank you, Yuko, for this comment. So Yuko says that what you see, that a lot of the restaurants that you go to use paper containers that don't have a plastic lining, whereas most of the drinkware is plastic. Dagny, I think you're still here. I can't actively see you at the moment. Would you like to speak a little bit to to sort of Yuko's comment from the technical expert perspective?
Could you point out which one it was?
So it's the very last one in the chat, if you open your chat. So she says, many of the restaurants I go to already use paper containers, not plastic lining. And then she says, on the contrary, all of the drinkware has a plastic base and lids and straws. Starting with cups could possibly reduce more plastic waste. Also, cups probably have a fast return rate.
So I'll start from the bottom. I think I would concur about the cups have a faster return rate. So I think that's beneficial for the system overall. Maybe you need less inventory when things are turning around more quickly. People aren't putting containers in their fridge to hold on to for a couple of days. And definitely, I mean, there's a couple of things with the paper containers versus the plastic, and there's sort of a trade-off of things. From the paper materials perspective, we're looking at often having PFAS or other chemical additives to paper materials, because as I'm sure we've all experienced, if you pour water on paper, it doesn't hold liquid well. And so while it is mostly paper and some of them don't have a plastic lining, in order to make that material waterproof, there's a chemical compound being added to that. And so happy to try and share some resources. Food Packaging Forum is a really good place to go to that speaks a lot to the PFAS. There's a whole host of other chemicals that can be involved in the paper. So there's a little bit of a health impact potentially there, or a lot, I would say. And for the paper, for the cups, I think you're right. There's generally going to be a plastic lining in most paper cups. Some of them have just moved to a chemical compound as well. So it's not necessarily a given that there's a plastic lining, but most frequently that's still the case.
Thanks, Heidi. And we actually have links. If you open the pre-read that you can download from the website, there are a bunch of links in there about concerns of toxicity, so different chemicals of concern for different types of materials. Both paper disposables and plastics disposables have different, but sometimes the same, but mostly different chemicals of concern in them. So you can learn a lot more about it there. There's also, we included, and this is not to make anyone sad, but I know often people reuse disposable containers because it feels like you can and should, but there are some things to know about in terms of chemicals of concern exposure from those as well. So there's some articles included in there just with some references. So people, I know I hate discouraging reuse because obviously we're here to focus on reuse. So how do we make sure that people are reusing things safely is obviously a big concern. And thank you, Jennifer, for adding in the chat also that paper. So I know it's possible that restaurants are using compostable fiber or compostable paper packaging, but if it doesn't get composted, first of all, if it has chemicals, you probably shouldn't compost it anyway, but if it doesn't get composted, then it is not doing a lot of great stuff in the landfill either. So thank you for flagging that, Jennifer.
Yeah,
I think
great point.
Yeah. Anything else to add, Dagny?
No, I think that's all, unless there's questions. But I mean, the methane is real. It's about 80 times, paper, compostable materials in a landfill environment are a really negative impact for climate change.
Anyone else want? We've had some great discussion here, and I think we've heard from most folks on the Oh, and I think Tiff, your comment got out of range for me, but now I see it again. Thank you for aligning with Jennifer and Vanessa based on highest volume. So thank you for weighing in there. I'm just making sure I haven't missed anything else. Okay, any additional, this was just listening on this, so we're not trying to make a decision about one or any of the others, but really excited to have all this feedback. And I think already we've learned a lot from this group about what could work best in Hilo. Going once, going twice. Any last comments? Okay, well, this is not your last chance to weigh in. We're going to scooch down the page now once Andy's finished capturing the last few notes there, and we're going to look at materials. So this, we've already started to comment on materials, but and we're going to go a little bit more deeply into some of the material considerations. The three materials that we have framed up here are stainless steel, glass, and plastic. You've already heard a bit. Actually, TC, I think, did a great job of outlining some of the pros and cons of each of these. I'm not sure how much I have to repeat that. Stainless steel, durable, a little bit heavy, which is not ideal for both users and for greenhouse gas. It can get banged up, so that can happen over time, but it can also be pretty durable, and depending on how it's being cared for, it can last quite a long time. Both stainless steel and glass are pretty inert when it comes to chemicals of concern, which is great. We hear sometimes that people would like to be able to microwave their food or drinks in the container, and glass is obviously just fine for that. Plastic can be technically microwave safe, but there is certainly an issue of chemicals of concern when you're microwaving food in plastic. So want to be careful about that. And stainless steel, we all think of obviously as not being very microwavable, though I was at TJ Maxx over the weekend, and they have microwavable stainless steel that they're selling on their shelves now. I haven't tried it yet, but I'll keep you posted. So that's an emerging option potentially, is something that is a microwave safe stainless steel. Other things to flag here, I think you can see we have a long list of pros and cons for each of these. In terms of cost, which I haven't spoken to, plastic, of course, is the cheapest. Glass and stainless steel are both more expensive, but you also get more rotations from them. So if you think about it on a life cycle perspective, it may that sort of be on a per use basis. The difference isn't that high from a cost perspective in terms of cost of the system, but purchasing a lot of plastic is going to be a lot cheaper than purchasing a lot of glass or a lot of stainless steel to get started. Dagny, as our technical expert, anything else you would like to just highlight before we open it up to further discussion on materials?
No, I would just, I think I could say the stainless companies out there that are using stainless steel, I've seen people are saying around a minimum of 500 rotations. And I just saw some new data come back, I think this week, where they're getting up to 2,000 over, like they're at 2,000 and still going. So I think that there's some good examples of stainless steel, as long as it's designed well enough and durable enough, really going for the long haul. Glass, I would also say that we do have examples of glass that is now being used in reusable foodware systems. Monaco, all of Monaco is using glass for their foodware program that they have. And so I think that there's maybe some, on the spectrum of the ball jar to some of the tempered glass that's coming out, there's sort of a range of what's possible in terms of really being thoughtful around the breakability. Although I would concur that I think that any initial starts would mean that there wasn't public return bins for glass. And on the plastics side, I would say, yes, definitely lightweighting is great for the climate. It is definitely less breakable than the glass, obviously. There's a growing body of evidence around concerns about it from a chemical migration standpoint. So I think we have to, I would encourage everyone to consider the health side of that material. And we are learning a little bit about the amount of scratching or wear and tear that is happening with plastics, not necessarily from its functionality perspective, but from a perception perspective from the users. And so I think a little bit for each of them.
I see Ellen has her hand raised, but Ellen, maybe hang on just for one more second. Dagny, are you able to speak at all to different types of plastic? So I know we mentioned polypropylene here. I know there's at least one company using HDPE, high density polyethylene. Any
Yeah,
just commentary on
sure.
different, yeah.
Well, I think that there's, I think the baseline is that there's health concerns around plastics. We know that from a microplastic, a leakage of microplastics in the washing phases, to then just the migration of plastics. So both the plastic itself breaking off into microplastics and entering our body, small particles, but also then the chemicals that migrate. That happens also in the washing phase. I think one of the particular HDPE, there's some unknown chemicals of concern. So from the food packaging forum position, I would say there's something like 18,000 chemicals, and less than 2,000 of them we understand are beginning to understand their interactions with the human body. And this gets even more complex when we take some of the maybe recovered plastics and make a material compound that's mixed. So then we have a whole bunch of chemical interactions that we don't understand very well yet.
Thank you. Okay, Ellen, thank you for being patient. I just wanted to kind of cover all that at once. And now I'd love to hear from you.
Okay, I was just wondering with stainless steel, well, okay, back up. I think the reason that the styrofoam and the plastic clamshells are so convenient is because they're one piece. And with stainless steel, Dagny, are you familiar? Is there anything that's hinged with stainless steel that has some sort of a hinged lid?
There are hinged stainless steel items. I think probably the ones that people might have seen or be most familiar with are sort of, they've been on the retail market as lunch boxes for children, and they have different compartments. It's almost like a bento box meets sort of the plastic container we're familiar with, and it closes and it has little places for everything. So I think, it's plausible to find ones. I think you bring up a great point. It certainly would be easier if you just had one piece, from making sure that you get both pieces back. There's some arguments to be made that the washing efficiency is increased when you have two pieces. The way that the stainless steel stacks in two pieces is more efficient than if you're trying to, do a one piece container in a rack that's really not designed for that. So that's the short of it. I think, yes, there are hinged. I don't know if hinged that are ideal necessarily yet for a reuse system.
Thank you. You answered my question, or actually my concern is having multiple pieces. The bento boxes that we have, there's a little clip and there's several stacks, or if you have the single one, there's a divider that you can put into it. So there's an additional piece plus the lid. So that's the one disadvantage I could see.
Yeah, the bento boxes that are stacking, or like that you see the tiffins, it's a very common design in India in particular. They're also stacked, and then the bento boxes have a slightly different. India uses round. The bento boxes tend to be a sort of a rectangle shape. I think that what has been found in the reusable space is non-stacking is best. The bowls are easier if you have two pieces, because then you can have nesting that takes place as well. I think the leakage rate of lids to containers, I don't know that we have excellent data on that at this point. I haven't seen a reusable system that started in stainless steel that hasn't maintained it as an option. So, it's a guess, but not hard data that they're mostly getting the lids back, or I think they would have a real viability problem. But I would say that I don't have the hard numbers on that.
Thanks, Ellen. It's a great question. Thanks, Dagny, for saying what we know and what we don't quite know. You're up next, Jennifer. And Andy, I just want to acknowledge Alex. Thank you for your comment in the chat. And I think it's been captured. If there's anything else you want to add, please do. But Jennifer, why don't you go next with your comment?
I just was looking back at our community engagement data, and just there's not a ton of enthusiasm for plastic. We had, you know, in early days for containers, about a 30% preference for plastic, 69 for stainless steel. To me, I don't see it as like we're going to use one material type for everything. I think like certain material types work really well for different contexts. I think we all have our concerns about plastic, but in the near term, it might be a good training wheels material, you know, especially like if we start with the clamshell. The plate lunch, you know, there's already a like pretty low cost, you know, very similar. It's behaviorally, it's not a huge change for people. So that might be a good starting point while we're teaching people how to engage with the system. And then maybe over time, because the data for like long term, it was like 6% preference for plastic, you know, so maybe starting with some plastic and then phasing out to something over time, for the containers, specifically for the clamshell containers. And then I think like, I don't think we ever want to put like piping hot food or beverage into a plastic container, right? So like, I'm thinking of like Thai curries, right? And soups, and those are common takeout foods here. And so I think we definitely would want those to be stainless steel or containers, or glass, probably stainless steel. So I just see it as like different uses, different contexts, and I feel comfortable like putting a cold drink into a plastic container, maybe, you know, like people's Starbucks, whatever. And then the clamshells as plastic, and then for other contexts, perhaps other material types. So that's just my 2 cents.
I'll add one thing really quickly. Jennifer, thanks. And this isn't intended to be an argument against, but you sort of brought up something that I remembered because of what you said that I forgot to mention earlier. And one thing just to keep in mind, to the training wheels comment, one thing that we have found is somewhat interesting, I think, to this conversation is that depending on the plastic item, there can be confusion as to whether that item is reusable, because it can seem very similar to traditional plastic throwaway items. So it has been shown that there is some value in having something that's distinctly different, so people really know that there's no confusion that it's to be thrown away. So sometimes stainless steel serves in that way, or other materials other than plastic.
I'm sorry that we're losing you, Vanessa, but thank you for being here. And please feel free to bring additional perspectives at any point. I want to test for any other perspectives on material. Alex, I see you've got some in the chat as well. Stainless steel, essential for hot food beverage, but open to mixed materials, as Jen just said. Okay, thank you very much for that. Yeah, it sounds like there could be comfort with plastic in some contexts, but recognizing that there may be contexts where plastic is not going to be the right thing. Ellen, back to you.
And I was going to say, let's not forget that we're also going to be encouraging BYO and whatever. Yeah. So crowd events where they're serving fountain drinks, BYO is an ideal place to bring your own cup. You know, like the Hilo Town markets, if they're doing fountain type thing, or pouring out of a jug or something.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. So anyway, I guess I'm trying to say back to the containers, looking at food containers and then stainless steel.
And I'll just add, I agree. I mean, I think that there are some use cases, like we're never gonna have a 44-ounce stainless steel cup. You know, a big gulp is not coming, or a major like shaved ice that's enormous. That those are not going to be good use cases for stainless steel. So I really agree with Jen that there are probably going to be places where it makes some sense.
Dick, we have a question in the chat from Tiff. Does the type of material selected make a difference on the washing technology or system?
It does. Plastic dries slower. So some companies that are using plastic for reuse systems have developed systems specifically to help create more efficient drying. It has to do with sort of the temperature of the wash as it goes through. If you have a high temperature wash, stainless steel is just, it retains its heat, and so it dries faster. But definitely it also affects sort of the chemicals used in the wash and wash temperature. So it is trickier when you start to have mixed materials in your washing system, because you want to wash those same materials, ideally in the same periods of time, because you're going to have different sort of mixes in your washing and temperature and other drying factors to consider.
Does that
Great
mean
question.
that a whole different kind of machine is needed for one or the other?
No, it doesn't
Okay,
mean a
thanks.
different machine. Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, different settings and batching, I think. Ellen, I see your applause. Yes, it's good to know.
Oh,
We don't
sorry.
need-
I meant to raise my hand, sorry.
Oh, okay. Well, I appreciate the applause as well, but go ahead.
Okay. But Dagny, if I remember correctly, you mentioned that plastic requires chemical sanitization because you can't use the high heat. Did I remember that from a couple of weeks ago?
This is an argument that's out there. I mean, I think we're just, again, beginning to really understand the depth of the amount of microplastics that are shed during these different processes and chemical migration, except it's all impacted by heat and temperatures, but then you have to have the sanitization as well. So chemicals are one way to try and get around them. But then there's some question about what the chemical interaction is with these materials as well. So if we're talking about just like what we know is inert materials are the ones that we know for sure are safe. How these interactions happen outside of inert materials, so in plastics, it's just still unknown. So it is more likely you're probably going to use some chemicals, but then you have a trade-off around how those chemicals are interacting. I wish I could give you like a straight answer, but unfortunately we're nascent really in our understanding of this.
Thanks.
Any other comments on materials? I think if we can squeeze it in today, we'd like to cover a little bit about return bins and the collection process. So, okay, Yuko, I see you've added one thing. Plastic can stain. So Yuko says, in my experience with the reusable program, some plastic containers have stains. Even though they are clean, sometimes I felt discomfort. However, plastic is lighter to carry around. So sounds like Yuko, you're weighing the pros and cons, as I think we all are at this moment. I think that's true. I think we'll note that, and I think we recognize that both things are true. Anything else on materials for today? We haven't had, I would love to just ask if anyone has feelings about glass. We've talked mostly about steel and plastic. We heard from TC about glass can break. I think that's, in many ways, a big con that we all think about. We've thought about, glasses for the jars, for example, but as Dagny mentioned, Monaco has a reuse program where they're using containers. So it's like lunch containers that are glass with a separate lid that I believe is silicone or plastic. I can't remember. Any thoughts on glass as a material for containers, or even potentially for, it sounds like TC mentioned that they use them for drinks as well. So thoughts on glass as a material for containers or cups?
I am obviously an advocate for glass. Actually, I use it in my everyday life. That's kind of what I use when I bring my own reusable things around. So I think it would just kind of psychologically already help me like remember that this is reusable and this is, you know, what I take to restaurants and when I'm out, what I grab and throw in my bag and things like that. And yes, it is breakable, but consciously, I think if we realize that this is things that we start carrying around, maybe we can, you know, be a little more careful with the glass. Plus, too, if they are coming out with more advancements in glass and having it be more resistance to breaking, I think that's just an even greater thing.
Thanks, Kira. Ellen, did you raise your hand on the question of glass?
Of course, because Ku'ulei and I are the big Corelle users, which I don't really consider ceramic, it's glass, and those are the plates. That, I mean, you can drop them and they don't really break very easily. So I think Ku'ulei and I would love to see Corelle, but we know that they're kind of questionably in business at this point.
Yeah, I see Kool-Aid chimed in on in favor of glass as well, an ardent preference for glass. So yes, totally appreciate that. And the stackability is obviously something we acknowledged as well. It's, you can't nest them as efficiently. So unless it's a plate, if it's a cup or a container, it's just harder to get as many into the same space. Jennifer asked a question in the chat about impacting how glass impacts the return process. Dagny, if you want to talk to that.
Sure. It's a great question. I think what we've seen in Monaco is that they have, which, you know, I think we need to experience it firsthand or get a lot of better pictures and understanding of the return system that they have. I think that it does impact probably your ability to have as many bins. I think it means that you may have to have lower volume in the bins that you have, so you lessen the amount of like top to bottom stacking that takes place. These are question marks. We haven't seen a lot of public space return bins. Monaco is one of the first that we've seen public space return bins for glass. So, you know, in theory, I'm a huge fan as well. I think it's a great material for reuse. It's not a great material for single use because of environmental shortages, but I think that we would have to understand more about how it impact return. I think we could learn more about that when we start to learn about where returns take place in the system as well. It might turn out that most people are returning in stores, and I think that that would be less of a barrier for us.
Thanks, Dagny. A couple of comments in the chat. Thank you, Alex. Appreciate your comment about how not all glass can be recycled with other glass. And that's a really good point. So when we think about the recyclability and the ability for these materials to be truly circular, I think that's a great call out. It'd be worth looking at, you know, the details on that in terms of what type of glass would eventually get used in this system to see, you know, for that specific option, what it would be, but it's a great call out. The glass is not all glass. And then Jennifer says, yeah, that given the complications around return or some of the different return systems, it could be a longer solution, not a starting point. Thank you for that perspective as well. And then Troy, I see your comment. Our project is a higher and better goal for our community, and I believe that the containers we use need to match up. Even though more expensive, stainless represents high quality. So I think that's a great perspective as well. Part of what we need to remember is that this is a system that people have to want to use, right? They have to be excited to choose the reusable. And so, yeah, what's going to feel really good to people is really important. And one more vote from Jennifer on glass is getting more innovative, lighter, more durable. So I think you can put supported by Kool-Aid, Jennifer, and Ellen. I think we have some ardent supporters of glass. Awesome. This is super helpful. So
Can I just add
Yeah,
one
Jen,
little
go
thing before you go? I know stainless steel has its benefits in terms of being inert and durable, but I think like we need to keep in our minds like the entire life cycle of products. And so like stainless steel has to be mined, you know? And so it's not happening here in Hawaii, but it's certainly happening somewhere, probably China. And so I think like that's the main thing that makes me not as enthusiastic about stainless steel is like what impact are we having? Because I think where we mine anything in the world, it's pretty destructive. So I think that I just wanted to raise that point because it didn't really get brought up in this discussion today.
Thank you.
It's a great
Jennifer. Yeah.
point. And I think for you're absolutely right. For all of these materials, we have to think about that. There's a shortage of silica for glass. It's a real massive problem. Also an environmental impact there. Obviously, we know the back end of plastics. I think that part of the process innately has to be like looking at the full life cycle and what are the supply chains. So do you have approval on supplier manufacturing? What does that look like? Where are these coming from? Do you have an end of life plan? You know, like was brought up about, can we recycle this glass? We can only choose a glass that's recyclable, or otherwise I think it's going to lose. The same for stainless steel. Infinite recyclability for stainless steel is incredible as long as you're actually engaging in the infinite recyclability of that material.
Yeah, we've got a couple good resources coming through in the chat here. Craig dropped a link in, which is really helpful. And then Alex also mentioned that there's wide availability of 100% post-consumer recycled stainless steel. So sourcing recycled steel, obviously better than extracting it virgin, though it did have to be extracted at some point. So these are all good considerations. I know I'm actually not sure how long this meeting is supposed to go, but I would love to ask this group for another 10 minutes or so to look at return bins and then to tee up our mapping exercise. And then we'll let everybody go. I mean, I'm happy to stay around as long as you all like, but I don't know how much longer everyone has. So if you have more comments on materials, please put them in the chat and we'll make sure that they get captured. And really, really appreciative of this discussion. I feel like it's actually been it's been very rich and a lot of really good perspectives. So very appreciative of that. Andy, when you're ready, I would love to zoom to the right and look at our collection bin. Oh yeah, wait, right and down, I guess. There we go, the big one. Thank you. So maybe Dagny, just to avoid hearing too much of my voice, would you like to speak a little bit to our sort of just an overview of collection bin options? And then I want to make sure we do any quick reactions people have, but then introduce the mapping exercise so we can get everyone's sense of maps, and then we'll hand it back to Kool-Aid to wrap us up. Are you able to read this very tiny text here? Okay.
I am doing my best to get there. Lost it on my own board, so to yours. And I don't know that I need the text necessarily, but I think the indoor bins, just the ideal is that they're at every single location that offers the reusable. So hopefully that's everywhere. I think that a combination of tech and non-tech enabled is useful. Obviously, the non-tech enabled bins are going to be less expensive, variety of shapes and sizes, and they can be as low tech as like a bus bin, potentially, depending on where they're located inside of the business. The tech enabled offer, again, the value of tech enabled is that you know exactly when that container was returned, where it was returned, and how many given containers are in any given place. So it helps with overall efficiencies within the system and is a quicker way, most often for users, to be secured that the return was made. For the outdoor collection bins, obviously these have to be all of the things. I think we started into this discussion. It was really fun. We got to hear about Bins on Fire last week. For those of you that weren't here, watch the video. You know, these are street hardened materials that have been tested for, you know, unfortunate human interactions and other environmental interactions, humidity, pests, salt water, salt in the air is a big thing to be considered, particularly for the tech ones, but also obviously for non-tech enabled. The materiality can be anything from wood to stainless steel to some composite materials that are out there, so we can get back into a plastic composites conversation. So there's a lot of different options, broadly speaking, about what has been used for these bins. I think that there, rightly so, has been some concern raised around the theft. And this is a place where I think there's been a lot of work done by everyone who is offering these bins and selling these bins, because they know having something that is theft proof is critical to the success of these systems, as well as being able to be bolted into the ground, et cetera, et cetera. So I would say those are the broad. I didn't read off the script, so if I missed anything, then I think, I mean, there's no script, but I couldn't see the text on the board. So if I missed anything, anyone feel free to jump in and chime in.
Yeah, you can see some pictures here below. So some non-tech enabled bins can look very simple. It's probably worth saying that the actual design of the bins is something that, in terms of what they look like, how do we make sure it looks like a reuse bin as opposed to looking like a trash bin or a recycle bin or some other kind of bin? That's not something we need to worry about today. It's more about the functionality of the bins that we're focused on today. We know that the visual cues for reuse are going to be really important. And happy to share some of these tech-enabled bins that you can see on the right side are pretty schmancy. Yeah, they're like this one, when you line up your cup and just throw, this is the Starbucks one, when you like have the barcode on the cup or whatever the code, actually it's not a barcode, but when you line it up with that little screen, it like opens the little door underneath the cup and it like sucks it in. So it's very futuristic in a way. Do you want to speak more to that?
Most of the tech-enabled bins, you know, they're one way. They'll only open if you have an asset that is specific to the system. So one of the items. So even with RFID, you know, we all have some NFC or other components on our phone. It won't open the bin. It has to be an asset that's already recognized by the system. So that's a good protection level. And also, I will say that to what Ellie was saying, I think it's really important, especially for the non-tech enabled bin, they have a little bit more flexibility potentially, that it really, you know, the end game, and I know we're not deciding this now, but I think it's fun to think about, is that, you know, it feels like a part of your community. Not only does it identify itself as distinctly different from a trash can or recycling bin, but that, you know, there's lots of opportunities on the external housing of these return bins to make them feel like home, like they belong there. And so, yeah, woo!
It's on a loop. It's not supposed to bring it back up. But yeah, thank you, Andy, for bringing that up. That's great. All right, so I think, you know, the recommendation here is that there's a mix of indoor and outdoor and tech-enabled, non-tech-enabled bins. You know, I don't, again, think there's not anything we need to decide about this today, but I know people definitely had a lot of perspectives last week on security. We've heard about insects, making sure that things stay clean. So any other kind of considerations that you'd like to flag for the design of the bins for right now?
I think in my experience, it's helpful, and maybe this is just really going to depend on the service operators. I don't know, and I think there's some conversations on design, but I think if there are OEV words, like Hawaiian words, and like community words on top of the bin, like not like random ones, but like Olalo no Eao or something to show that this is our work and it's not some invasive. I guess I'm specifically referring to like the tech enabled bins. It can be really like scary and maybe traumatizing to some old people to be like, what the hell is this robot in this place where I usually come? You know, and it's helpful to be able to recognize that that is a part of the ways that Hawaii is evolving technologically in alignment with our history, versus anything else. So just noting the power of culturally appropriate signage and verbiage to be integrated into the return bin design. So thank you.
Absolutely, Kulai. Thank you. 100%. Any other comments on bins at this moment?
I just have a comment. I would love to get the kids involved in, you know, on, anyway, just maybe not necessarily design, but it could be design. I mean, we've got a wonderful science technology museum. They do all kinds of robotic things on Saturday with the kids and their families. But anyway, if we could somehow get them involved later on, that would be great. Like a bin contest or something.
That's a wonderful idea. We've also seen local artists get involved in designing the outsides of bins. So yeah, I think there's a lot of great potential. As Dagny said, it shouldn't be like an eyesore. You know, it shouldn't look like a spaceship landed in Hilo. It should look like something that fits, you know, and that's adding to the feel and the experience of the community.
Thank you.
Alex, thank you for your comments about so Alex says if an outdoor bin is tech enabled with features reliant on a camera, do you expect vandalism? That's very realistic. And if it's more of a library return bin, expect people to shove disgusting things inside. I think that's also realistic. I think those are both very real comments. Thank you, Alex. There is obviously a sorting phase where you take the things you want and put them through the rest of your process and you do something else with everything else that ends up in the bin. The ability to minimize the contamination is a nice feature of tech-enabled bins, but as you stated, they also are a bit more vulnerable as assets go. All right, these are all excellent comments and great callouts. Let's go one across to I'm going to show you when we think about collection bin location, because I know this was a topic that a lot of people were interested in when we started talking about return time, is where will pickup bins be able to be? And this is a great chance for everyone to tell us where you think they should be. So Autumn has already put a link into the chat where this is an app called Padlet. And so ideally, if you click on the link, but maybe don't do it just yet, let me show you what it's going to look like and then you can do it. So Andy, as soon as you're ready, let's zoom across to the Padlet instructions, which I think are to the right. Keep going, activity instructions, there we go. All these sort of brown signs. So when you click on the link, it will give you the chance to pin 3 different locations that you think would be essential locations for return bins to be. And this map is a picture of Ann Arbor because that's one of our other cities and that's when we made these instructions for. But when you open the map, you should be able to see Hilo in your map. And there's already some points in there because this is an activity that has been ongoing from the community workshops. So you may be interested to see where people have placed their locations so far. And then this is a chance for you to place yours. Oh, and Andy, yeah, we can just walk through together if you want. So here's what you'll see when it pops up. And this really doesn't take very long at all. So see, can you zoom in on where they have the 84, there you go, 84 pins so far. There we go. So what you're going to want to do, and Autumn, I hope that you're standing by because it has been about, a few minutes since I did this last. I think we're going to click on that little plus sign on the bottom right. So look on the bottom right, and you're going to, you have a couple different options for how you want to do this. You can search for place by name. So if you wanted to search for Booch Bar, because you know that Booch Bar is where you want to go, then you want to make sure that Booch Bar has a return bin. So then you can select the Booch Bar on Kiawe Street in Hilo. And you don't have to write anything. You don't have to do anything else. You can just press publish. If you would like to add a note or anything, feel free. But you can press publish, and then the Booch Bar will be, and there you go. And voila, there it is. If you want to place a bin at somewhere that is not an existing business or a location that you can search on the map. So Andy, if you want to go back to our plus sign, you can also drag and drop a pin. So you see option 2. So if you just grab that, you can put it literally anywhere you'd like. And then it'll give you some options. So if you're trying to like aim for the Booch Bar and you get close, it'll give you that option, or you can choose, you know, one of these little addresses or intersections. So try to choose the one that's going to be the most specific. So if you just choose Hilo, that's not going to be super helpful for us. We might not understand exactly what you meant, but yeah, if you click that option, you can double check that it's where you think you want it to be. And if there's some comment like, you know, it should be near the bandstand, or, you know, whatever it is, something that is going to be helpful for us to interpret your dot, then that is worth adding as well. And make sure you press publish so that you don't lose your dot. You don't have to publish yours, Andy, but make sure that
I didn't want to contaminate the good ideas
sure
that our community members will include.
So Kira, I see your question, will bins only be in Hilo? This is an opportunity for you to tell us where you think they should be. So if you would like to, I mean, using this, you could place a pin literally anywhere in the world on this map. It will be most useful if you keep it in Hawaii County for this exercise right now. So feel free to place it wherever you think bins should be. And this link will be good for a while still. So if we'll make sure to make it available on the website, and we'll send it in the follow-up email from this call. And this is a chance for everyone to share the word and, you know, make sure we get as much data as we can. And we plan to have so ask people to do it, let's say by Monday, if possible, maybe even sort of today or tomorrow, so that we have our data science team also working on a draft map based on other considerations, which they kind of cross-reference with these points. So it's all integrated into one big map. So the sooner you get us your points, the easier it will be for them to integrate your points into their draft map. But again, this will be an ongoing process. So if they miss the Monday deadline, no problem at all. We'll just add it in later. Any questions? You can do it now, you can do it later. Just want to make sure everyone was up to speed on this exercise, and really excited to get all the data points that you have to share.
And Ellie, I don't know if you want to voice over the redemption centers as well, because we can also use this tool to collect that information.
How would you like people to indicate redemption centers?
I think just changing the color to orange is great. That's what I had listed in the instructions. So just to keep it consistent.
Perfect. Thanks, Autumn. Great. Andy, if you want to take us back to the Miro for a moment. And you can, yeah, you don't have to keep your sample points. I just want to make sure there's nothing else that we wanted to capture here. Yeah, I think so. We will continue talking about bin locations next week when we have a draft map, hopefully based on what we've seen here. And, you know, we'll certainly take into account any additional feedback on that as we go. I do see Craig has some late breaking comments here on bin design. So thank you for adding those comments, Craig. The High Five collection bins in downtown Hilo was a lot of stuff just not making it into the bin. And Craig says it just took a couple of business owners to complain, and the bins were all pulled from downtown Hilo. So the pushback against getting reverse vending machines at retailers were bugs, leakage, Department of Health regulations, how often will it be serviced, and so on. Dagny, do you want to speak to the sort of the ability to keep these bins clean and not let them get disgusting?
Yeah, I mean, I think this has been a big concern of anyone and everyone in the space from the very beginning. So I think the folks that are designing and then operating these bins are hyper cognizant of these issues because, you know, they don't want their bins pulled. So I think there's been a lot of thinking done around finding things that actually contain smells. If you have foods in there for a day, 24 hours, couple of days, 3 days, old milk, whatever it is. Thinking about leakage. So most of them have internal housing that is leak proof, that tries to work hard on how they do the housing to get the smells, the bugs, all of the things. I think you're not going to eliminate these things entirely, obviously. But I think like bees, I know in some environments have been challenging for certain return bins. I think it's about having service contracts in place. Many of the tech-enabled bins will indicate when not necessarily there's bees around, but at least they're going to indicate how full those bins are. So you'll have a sense of when things are filling up, how much is in there. So I don't think that these are issues that we're going to get away from entirely, but I can at least say they're issues that people are highly cognizant of and are doing as much to design bins that take this into account and minimize the negative impacts.
Okay. Thank you, Dagny. Oh, Ellen, I see you raised your hand, and then I don't want to keep anyone prisoner here in this process. So I think after Ellen's comment, we'll hear if there's any other late breaking comments, want to hear them, but otherwise then I'm going to hand it back to Kulay to close this out. Ellen, go ahead.
Yeah, in one of the earlier slides, one thing that wasn't mentioned, but it is on the slide, is the various kinds of housing inside the bin, talking about bags versus, you know, containers, rigid containers. Anyway, will we have an option later on to help design that?
Yeah, and it is acknowledged on here. I think the main trade-off there is if you have rigid containers, you want to really wait till they're full to pick them up. And if you, depending on the level of tech or non-tech, like it can take a while to get that optimized. Obviously, the goal is to use as little single-use plastic as possible, but given some of the distances in Hilo, it would be, so if you picture you have a truck or a van that's driving around picking up the totes, sort of like a tote that would live inside of the bin and get filled up and then it gets swapped out. So you take out the one full of dirties, you put in a clean one. If you have a lot of totes that just have a few items in them, then you're going to be doing a lot of driving around with a full truck that's not actually full of items. Whereas if you have them in plastic bags, you can get more, you don't have a lot of extra space that you're driving around because you can have them be more densely packed in the back of the truck. So this is something that we would actually look to the life cycle assessment model to help us determine what's the kind of tipping point. And if you have longer distances to travel, you really need to max out the ability of the truck to be carrying items as opposed to just empty air. So that's
Okay.
something we'll do some analysis on that and sort of see how it goes. I think as the system gets adopted over time, you would hope that you'd have enough volume that you'd be able to use the durable totes, but it might be that in the initial days. Sorry, go ahead, Ellen.
No. Thank you. Yeah, I saw the mention of the LCA and I didn't know when that would, you know, be looked at. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. No, it's a great question. And yeah, trade-offs, you know, what you want cost and optimization. You don't want to have extra greenhouse gas emissions just to be able to use reusable items. So lots of things to balance. Okay, last call for any other comments. Otherwise, Kulay will wrap us up. And even if you don't have a comment here, email it to Kulay, email it to me, send us a note, add it to the Miro board. You know, we want to hear everything, even if you think of it 20 minutes after this call. So, oh, thank you. Awesome. Kulay is very available.
Yes, I am, and I appreciate the ability to be. I wanted to share that yesterday I joined in to give the Lele'ili Community Association some updates on our work, and they did this Waiuli We Count study, and they estimated like 27 almost 27,000 people in 1 month frequenting that one area of the Kai. So there's a lot of people there, and I'm just hopeful that we can maybe put a bin close to some of those areas. So I'm excited to think through the ways that this will be impactful for us. When it comes to what to expect, you know, the behavior of folks who are underprivileged and in spaces of survival and in spaces of kind of just doing whatever without any kuleana, like any understanding of kuleana or what's pono, or like there's a lot of people who are far from morality. Like we fall away from the general morality, but also we don't realize the impact of our actions over time. And I'm hopeful that there's a way that, I mean, I think we need to take precautions anyway when it comes to the bins. Like, well, obviously, whatever kind of planning we need to do to make sure that vandalism and what's the other thing? Vandalism and theft is minimized. Yes, absolutely. And I believe in our ability to up the morale of our community. I really believe in the ability for Hawaiian people and local people to remember again the pono and the aloha for our aina that we come from. Like I believe in that, and I want to hold true to that belief and figure out a way to get that really more widespread. So let's think about that. Let's let that be the homework in addition to the map exercise. Let's just try to think of ways that we or anybody we know that is less likely to or is more likely to vandalize or steal something. Let's think of a way that we can maybe reach out to maybe not that one person, but just that community. How can we reach that community of people to support them in getting back to this identity that is pono and true and real? I think that's a good question for us to consider just as we move forward with the collective health and wellness of our community on our minds. So I just mahalo each of you for being here, and if it seems like a tangent that we're talking about the health and wellness of a human in relationship to this work, then let's work on bridging that gap, because the idea is that we can think clearly about how those things are related. But I know it's just about time, so just mahalo to each of you. I don't have any other mana'o. We have our contact information in the chat, and we can all be well until we see each other again next week at, I think, 8 a.m. Yeah? Okay, that's all I have. Malama pono and ahui ho.
Ahui ho, mahalo.
Mahalo,
Mahalo
mahalo
nui.
nui,
Aloha.
mahalo pono.
Alama.